I've been getting a lot of comments from people, especially on Instagram, about how they would love to try backpacking, but they just don't know what they're doing and they don't know where to start. So I thought I would make you guys a video and talk you through what it is you need to know in order to go on your first backpacking trip. Hi guys, if you don't know me, I'm Audrey. I'm traveling known as Glow Stick. In 2018, I quit my job in Washington, D.C. and thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. And now I live in Colorado, where I just hike and backpack and do all the outdoor things all the time. It's wonderful, I love it, it's the greatest. But anyway, so I always love to share my adventures with you guys. And I also like to empower you to go on adventures of your own. So this is where I got the idea to do this video on how to take your first backpacking trip. If you don't follow me on Instagram, you should. I'm at Audie Payne, AUDIPAYNE. So give me a follow for even more adventures over there. And of course, it's probably the easiest place to get in touch with me because for some reason, the comments on YouTube sometimes get a little lost. They're not quite as obvious as I think they should be or as they are on Instagram. So Instagram's your best bet in getting in touch with me. But I wanted to say first off about gear. I'm not going to go through my entire gear list because I have a whole other video about the gear that I have, but I will touch on some important things that you need to know about gear. So why don't we start there since I've already brought it up. Number one, you of course need a pack. I mean, really, let's talk about big three. Your big three is your pack, your sleeping bag, and your tent. So these are obviously probably your most important pieces of gear, and there are lots of options out on the market. If this is really truly your first backpacking trip or you're very much a beginner and you don't really know yet what works for you or what different types of gear there are out on the market, I'll say that backpacking gear is expensive, but it doesn't have to be. Depending on if you feel like you need the newest gear or the latest gear or whatever, or if you're just starting out, you should try a bunch of different stuff, see what works for you, see what you like. And you can do this by renting gear from outdoor outfitters. I know that REI, for example, rents out backpacking gear, as do a lot of different outdoor outfitters. You can also get used gear on Craigslist. Borrow gear from a willing friend. I am willing to bet if you're outdoorsy, you have outdoorsy friends, and that probably means that you have people with backpacking gear just sitting in their closet that they're not using. I know that I have some extra stuff. For example, I'm not regularly using the backpack that I used along the AT just because I've upgraded since then and gotten something that's much lighter. So, I mean, I haven't gotten rid of my backpack from the AT because it has sentimental value, but if a friend came to me and was like, hey, I want to go backpacking, do you have anything I could borrow? I would definitely let them borrow that. So I would say starting off, until you know that you truly love backpacking and you're going to do it a lot, don't spend all of that money to get the newest stuff, to get the lightest stuff, especially because if you're just starting out, you're not going to know what it is that you like. You can do research all day long, but until you actually go test stuff out and see what it's like out in the backcountry, you're not gonna know what you like. But if you can, if you're renting gear or if you're getting it on Craigslist, try to get lightweight stuff. This is a mistake that I made on the AT. I mean, I really didn't know much about gear. I'd been on backpacking trips before, but they were few and far between. And I didn't know that a backpack that weighs 4 pounds is heavy. I didn't know that a tent that weighs 4 pounds is heavy because that sounded reasonable to me at the time. And now that I'm much more experienced, I'm like, oh, no, that's so heavy. That's so heavy. All of my big three on the AT weighed over 4 pounds each. Now my sleeping bag and my pack both weigh under 2 pounds each. And my tent weighs just over 2 pounds. And I want a lighter tent. I'm like, I want them all to be under 2 pounds because you'll quickly find that how much fun you're having while backpacking will often correlate to how much weight you're carrying on your back. If you're carrying a ton of weight on your back, it's gonna be much harder and more miserable. So do your best to whittle down the weight on things. Make sure you bring a sleeping pad because it's gonna make you more comfortable while you're sleeping, and it also helps you to keep warm while you're sleeping. I didn't know that out of the AT either, that it helped keep you warm, but it does. And the higher the R value of the sleeping pad, the warmer it will supposedly keep you. So that's just like how they measure how warm the sleeping pad is going to keep you by the R value. So if you're buying a sleeping pad, check out what the R value is. And if you're a colder sleeper like me, you're going to want a higher R value. In addition, you're going to want probably a cook system, unless you want a cold soak, which means you just like soak stuff for a certain amount of time so that you don't have to cook it. I'm not a cold soaker. I do have friends that are into cold soaking though, because they don't like to have to carry the weight of the stove and the fuel and all of that stuff and the pot. It's really up to your preference, but personally, I like to have a nice hot meal at the end of the day, and I like to start my day with a coffee. So cold soaking, not for me. You're gonna want a water filter. I love the Sawyer Squeeze. You're gonna want rain layers. You're gonna want warm layers for camp. I am really into my puffy, which is a Patagonia micro puff. Puffies are freaking amazing because they're super lightweight, but they're super warm. They're insulating. You're gonna want a shovel to bury your waste. If you are someone who squats to pee, you might wanna consider getting a Kula cloth. This is a pee rag, so you don't have to use toilet paper every time you pee. And so on. Like I said, I'm not gonna go through every single piece of gear that I have. Go watch my gear video if you wanna learn more about my gear. But I thought that those were the basics that I should really bring up. If you have any questions about gear, feel free to reach out. Let me know. I'm not a gear expert. Some people get like so crazy into gear. I just find the stuff that works for me. And I know a fair bit about what you need. And I obviously have tons of backpacker friends, so I've been exposed to lots of different gear, but I'm not gonna say I'm an expert. I can probably help you though, especially if you're a beginner. One thing that I forgot to mention in terms of gear is that you should bring a pair of lightweight camp shoes. These are Tevas. I really like them. They're not like the lightest of the light, but I feel like I need a little extra support on my feet. So to me, it's worth carrying a little bit of extra weight and not having my feet suffer, because my feet tend to swell when I'm backpacking, just like being on my feet all day, dealing with the weight of the pack. At the end of the day, when I get to camp, it's really important to me that I can take off my boots and let my feet breathe and give them a break. And these allow me to do that while offering support. And these are also great for things like river crossings. So highly recommend that you bring a pair of camp shoes. In terms of planning a backpacking route, there are so many resources out there. You could very well even just type into Google search, backpacking trails in my area, whatever area it is that you're in. There's also a ton of apps out there that help you find hikes, like All Trails and Pro Trails, which allow you to put in the mileage that you would like to do. There's Hiking Upward, tons of resources out there. If you're gonna go for a weekend, I would say if you're just starting out, it really depends on what type of shape you're in, how many miles you want to do. But if you're just starting out, I would not plan to do more than 8 to 10 miles per day, because your body is not going to be used to the weight of your pack, and it's going to be a lot harder. You're going to be a lot more tired than you think, even if you're in great physical shape. They tell you at the beginning of the AT not to do more than 8 to 10 miles a day, and I think that's a really great rule of thumb. Granted, when you're starting in Georgia on the AT, it's pretty mountainous. There's a lot of ups and downs, but still, I think that, it takes a bit to get used to the weight of that pack carrying it, and you should start off slow so that you don't kill yourself on your first trip and then think you hate it, when really your gear was too heavy and you did too many miles or whatever. But the AT is a really great place to, try out your first backpacking trip if you're on the East Coast, because obviously it goes all the way from Georgia to Maine. So it hits so many different states. Most places on the AT, you do not need a permit. The exceptions there are the Great Smoky Mountains and Baxter State Park in Maine. But that means that you can just go find a place where you can park, and with the AT, there are so many resources out there where it's easy to find out where the parking lots are along the trail. So you can just find a place to park your car, find a friend to go with, put their car at the other end at a different parking place. You don't need a permit, you can just go hike. And there are designated shelters and designated campsites that you can stay at. I'm sorry I keep playing with my hair. It is like 97 degrees outside and I don't have air conditioning in my apartment and I'm so hot and my hair is like sticking to me. So that's why I keep playing with it, because I'm like trying to like fan myself off a little bit. Anyway, the AT is also great because it's really easy to find out where the water sources are, where the campsites are, and it's really easy to plan. Because when you're thinking about doing a backpacking trip, those are the things that you want to look into ahead of time. Where can you camp? On some trails, it's only in designated camping areas. Sometimes you need a permit in order to camp. Sometimes you need a permit just to be on the trail. You need to know where the water sources are. And like I said with the AT, it's really easy to find that out because there are resources out there that like hundreds or thousands of people are using each year to hike on the AT. But, you know, if you're going to a wilderness area, you just want to look and see in advance, like, who is in charge of this wilderness area? Is it the Bureau of Land Management? Is it the Forest Service? Is it a national park? And all of them are likely to have different rules and regulations. They're probably going to have maps available that are going to tell you where the camping spots are, that are going to tell you where the water is, that sort of thing. For example, I just recently went on a backpacking trip in Rocky Mountain National Park. I had to enter a lottery in order to get a permit to backpack there way back in like March, I think. And I went in July. And at that time, I had to reserve a backcountry campsite. I would say that's not the norm. That's more rules than most backpacking areas or hiking areas have. But you do want to look in advance. And like a lot of hiking areas, you can't stay overnight. So it really just depends. And you know, oh my God, I'm so hot. Guys, I'm so sorry. I'm so hot. I'm like melting. You also want to look into the rules for human waste. And by that, I mean poop. Most places that I've been backpacking, you simply have to dig a cat hole that's, 6 to 8 inches deep, bury your waste, bury your toilet paper along with it. And it usually has to be, I think, 200 feet away from water sources, trails, campsites. But in some places you actually have to like bring out bags, they're called WAG bags, and carry your waste out with you. That's more rare, but it's just all in order to protect the natural ecosystem. And then if you're lucky, some places have privies and then you don't even have to worry about it. You can just use the privy. On the AT, most of the shelters have privies, except in the state of Tennessee for some reason. But that's a really nice, not having to go find a tree to go behind or whatever. But I would definitely recommend bringing out a little shovel and of course your toilet paper and whatever else it is, whether you need WAG bags or what. When you're thinking about what food to bring out, I also have a video about food that I would eat on the AT or when I go backpacking. So I won't go too in depth into this either, but go watch that video if you're interested. I'll link it in the show notes. But you want to get really lightweight, nutritious stuff. I am a culprit. I eat a lot of candy while I'm out on trail. I need a lot of fast sugar, but it is really important that you're getting nutrition out there, getting enough carbs, getting enough fats, getting enough proteins. And you want your stuff to be lightweight. I like to eat granola in the mornings with coffee. I do like wraps or sandwich thins for lunch with like cheese or peanut butter or whatever. Cheese will stay okay for a couple of days as long as it's not too hot. I like to bring out dried fruits and trail mix and candy. For dinner, I'll usually have some sort of pasta, like a ramen or indomie, which is fancy ramen, or nor pasta sides or rice and beans, or even like the fancy backpacker meals if you're willing to pay the price for those. My favorite one is Backpacker's Pantry Pad Thai. Really recommend that one. It's kind of expensive, but it's so delicious. It's more of an every now and again treat for me because I don't like to pay those high prices, but it is really good every now and again. I get really into like gummies and things out in the wilderness. I've been really into fruit by the foot lately. I also like the little like dried garbanzo bean snacks or like the dried vegetable snacks, because I like to feel like I'm getting in a little nutrition even when I'm eating things that are processed or salty or whatever on trail. I always try to find ways to get nutrition in while I'm out there, especially if you're out there for a long time. This is truly important. Like on the AT, I've mentioned this before, but by the end I was super anemic and my hair was falling out and I was exhausted. And I definitely blame that on having a poor diet while I was on the AT. I just was like using it as an excuse to eat a bunch of junk food because I was exercising so much. But that was not the greatest plan. And I try to do better about that on my shorter backpacking trips, and I'm definitely hoping to do better than that on my next thru hike. People also often ask me like where are some good beginner backpacking trails in Colorado, and I would say the Colorado Trail is great. Like obviously that goes across like a large part of the state, so no matter where you're located in Colorado, you are possibly close to the Colorado Trail and you don't need permits to do the Colorado Trail, so you can just decide, you know, last minute like, oh, I'm gonna go do this section. And if you're looking for resources for the Colorado Trail, Gut Hook, which is an app, you can download information about the entire Colorado Trail. It tells you where the road crossings are, where the parking spots, where the water is, all that good stuff. And it's interactive, so people will leave comments for you. And then another one I would say is Lost Creek Wilderness, because the same thing, you don't need to get a permit in advance for this wilderness. It's just you self-register at the trailhead. And a lot of the areas in Colorado where you can backpack, you need to get permits in advance. A lot of these you have to get way in advance. I just backpacked to Conundrum Hot Springs near Aspen recently, and I had to get my permit way back in February, and it's now July. So a lot of them you have to plan way in advance, but you do not have to do that for the Colorado Trail and the Lost Creek Wilderness. And I do have a video on the Lost Creek Wilderness if you're interested in learning more about that one. I recently did the Lost Creek Wilderness Loop, which is 28 miles. It's probably a little hard for a beginner unless you're in pretty good shape, but I did it over the course of 2 days. So we did about 14 miles a day. I would not recommend that for beginners, but there are tons of campsites along the way. You could easily extend that to 3 or 4 days. So if you are a beginner, plan to have a little extra time to be doing that trail. And if you're backpacking in Colorado specifically, or another state where you're gonna be in the high mountains, higher elevation, plan for insane weather. The weather here in Colorado in the high peaks can do anything at any time. Thunderstorms, crazy lightning, snowstorms in the middle of summer. I swear to you, I almost got hypothermia last summer hiking the 4-pass loop near Aspen because it was raining all day long. We had to go up over a mountain pass that was over 12,000 feet above sea level, and a huge snowstorm rolled in. I was like drenched, completely soaked with cold water, and then the weather turned and it was snowing, and I was like, what do we do? What do we do? I was like, I cannot go over that pass. I will get hypothermia. So we ended up setting up a couple of tents, hiding in there, huddling together for about an hour until it stopped raining and snowing. And then we got so lucky, like we just watched this blue sky roll in, and then we were able to dry out all our stuff. Oh my gosh, seriously, we got so lucky. But that's just a lesson. When you're out in nature, anything can happen. Oh, and speaking of that, you do want to be careful about wildlife. You want to have some sort of bear container if you are in a bear area. So this usually means like a bear bag, which you hang up in a tree. And I would just say, watch a YouTube video about the proper way to hang a bear bag. I'm not very good at it. I don't have a good throwing arm, so I'm not the right person to be teaching you, but there are plenty of people out there that are good at it. So just do a YouTube search for that. It could mean having an ursack, which is a bag that's it's made so that bears cannot chew through it, and you tie it to a tree and it has all your food in it, and inside you would put it inside an op sack, which is basically just like a huge Ziploc bag that's pretty heavy duty so that hopefully the bears can't smell your food through it. Or you would do a classic bear canister, which those things are heavy, they're bulky, they're annoying to carry, but a lot of places actually require you to have bear canisters. So that's another thing that you should look up, the wilderness regulations, ahead of actually doing your backpacking trip. As far as other critters go, mice can be a big problem, especially in areas where they know that hikers are and they're used to smelling food. They can try to get in your packs or other things in the middle of the night, other rodents like pikas in Colorado. I just recently had one chew on one of my shoes in the night. So you just want to make sure that you're properly storing your food, not keeping it in your tent with you, keeping it away from camp. You don't want to lure any wildlife into camp, just to keep you safe, to keep them safe, all that good stuff. I do also want to mention some safety precautions that you want to take ahead of a backpacking trip. Number one, make sure you tell someone where you're going and when you plan to be back. If you have friends that you can take along with you, of course, it's always better to have people than to be alone, although admittedly I do hike and backpack alone sometimes, and I'm pretty comfortable doing that, but still, this is your first backpacking trip. You probably don't want to go alone. You want to make sure that you have a map and a compass and an extra battery for your phone. A lot of people take GPS devices with them out in the backcountry, like a Spot or an InReach. I don't have one yet, but I am actually planning to get one because I found that living on the East Coast, generally I had service, cell phone reception pretty much everywhere that I went. At least if I climbed up to the top of a mountain, I would have it. But here in Colorado, I so often do not have service, and I could go like, hours without it. So I do actually plan to get one. Make sure you have layers. Make sure that you're putting your things into dry bags or Ziploc bags, or in some way you're protecting your gear from getting wet especially if you get caught in the rain or the snow. It's so important that your sleeping bag and your camp clothes stay dry so that you can avoid getting hypothermia. Also, please always treat your water. Use a filter, use iodine pills. I recommend the filter because those iodine pills make your water taste real nasty. But do not drink the water right out of a stream. Even if you're in the mountains, you don't know what's upstream of you. You don't know if there's a dead animal up there. You don't know if someone has used the bathroom next to the stream, even though that's very bad practice. Please do not do that. You just don't know. You don't want to end up with like Giardia or amoebas or some other parasite and get really sick and dehydrated out there. So make sure that you do filter or treat your water. And if trails have self-register stations at the trailheads, make sure that you are signing into that wilderness. So, that's good because they like to see how many people are using the wilderness each year. But I also think it's a good safety precaution. They can see that you were there if something happens and you do go missing. And the last thing I will say about preparing for a backpacking trip is to look into leave no trace principles. So these are principles that help you lessen your impact on the outdoors, keep the areas that you're visiting beautiful and pristine and, wonderful for the next people to go by or to go through. And yeah, those are all the things that I have to say about planning your first backpacking trip. So I hope that helps. If something wasn't clear or you want some information on another topic, please let me know in the comments, or like I said, get a hold of me on Instagram. My handle's AudiePayne. Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And of course, I always love to hear from you guys, so feel free to leave a comment. Anyway, I'll talk to you all later.